Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Wilds Talk. Today we just have a bit of a fun discussion for you. A look at the weapons and how they've turned out in Wilds, just in terms of difficulty to understand and use, and then to actually maximize. How hard are they relative to one another? Naturally then, this is going to be a pretty subjective list, so I put together my outline with the basic reasoning for each, and then talked with both Josh and Cotton about it. That actually did make me rethink some of the order, and now I think we're all pretty happy with where I have things for this video. So we'll run through that list and see what you guys think, so let's get into it. Beginning with the easiest weapon, and then progressing up into the harder and harder weapons, until we've done all 14. So what's probably the easiest weapon in Wilds, at least based on our opinion? It's Lance. Lance had some pretty cool updates in Wilds where, with a focus strike, you're able to work in a little bit the shield, but mainly it's the new stuff like the triangle spam special triple poke, or being able to really retaliate in a counter style play. But I found every time I've engaged with the weapon, truly, a massive majority of it ultimately is that poke spam, which is what the weapon's all about. You're able to have really high uptime on your attacks, which means you've got easy pressure, which with focus mode is easier to aim, and obviously you can aim a little bit higher with Lance if you need to. And interestingly, with how effective guarding and especially perfect guarding is in Wilds, I found its kit even more simple. It's just an actual wall of a weapon with the most reliable shield you can use. And if for some reason just a basic guard or maybe even perfect guard isn't going to be enough, you've got the power guard for that reliable option even in the worst situations. But I find that it's overall just a very simple and effective kit that rewards a kind of non-stop aggressive playstyle for those endless pokes. Every time there's an incoming attack, you can mitigate it through your options of different tools and just punish in response. Lance is sadly one of the lesser used weapons when it comes to speedrunning, so seeing optimal play for it is harder to find. Maximizing the weapon, in my opinion, comes down to, yes, having that permanent uptime, but basically maximizing the right kind of counter to maintain the highest output. But I think it's very easy to pick up and play, and a very forgiving weapon to learn the game with. Just above that then, we now have light bowgun, which is, a pretty simple concept. Aim the gun at the enemy and fire. But the thing about light bowgun is, well, in relation to a heavy bowgun, it's a lot simpler. You're nice and mobile, and so that's super forgiving. You're able to do the dash step, or even a slide after that, to allow you to reposition out of even some of the nastier attacks. You're playing at range though, so you're able to aim and shoot weak points where others simply can't or have to wait for the openings. You get to play at comfy distances or positions, and so you get to punish openings really easy. There is a bit of tech to it, where say you have the burst step, where when your gauge is active, you're able to do this dash shot thing, which is really cool, very effective, very satisfying, but also not the most complicated thing. And obviously you have to manage your ammo a little bit, but really from watching the top level play of this weapon, it feels like proper positioning to be at the critical zone and permanent uptime on the ideal hit zone, then just do the burst step whenever you've got the gauge. It seems to be a lot of the weapon, so a pretty solid one to learn the game with too, and also on paper straightforward to maximize. Above that, we have Sword and Shield, which is interesting because I actually had it a bit higher on the list until I spoke with Cotton about this. You do have the whole new combo with that charged chop to maintain increased output, and then you the classic perfect rushes to leap back and leap up a monster. But even from beta to launch, it was made so aggressively free, whether that's the free-flowing, forgiving movement, where on your sword attacks you're able to just sidestep and gracefully move around enemy attacks and position at the optimal hit zone. The fact that you're able to, use items while the weapon's out, but also the free pod aiming, I found it significantly more straightforward and forgiving than other weapons. We can all fire a pod, a light pod that is, while a weapon's drawn, but it's an S&S that can move around and do it so much smoother and cleaner, and that shows in, say, these shia fights where you're able to pop those crystals without worrying about yourself, even when they're all around you, since you can move and fire so well. Obviously, a big part of it is having a guard on demand, and with perfect guard being so good in Wilds, this is one of the best in our opinion. You have insanely fast wind-up frames for just pulling out the guard whenever you need to, and that's what's so free about this weapon. Whatever combo you're in, you can swap into a guard or maybe start smacking with the shield, or go into a different combo, or reposition. Many of your attacks aren't going to hold you in place and mean that you've committed to anything. So you're able to pull out that guard and perfect guard on demand because of that. Even the attack while you're guarding, the guard slash, or reset the perfect guard window, so you're able to kind of go for a perfect guard while reliably holding a normal guard if it goes wrong. So yeah, it's just so forgiving. Maximizing the weapon obviously is a high skill potential, but at a base, it's a really easy weapon to pick up and play. Just above that then, we have one of my main weapons, dual blades, which I think is more complicated than it's been in a long time. And maybe people underrate or misunderstand that. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that dual blades is one of the hardest weapons in the game. The moveset, the combos, they're all very straightforward. Where the skill and complication comes in is about managing your stamina, about managing your demon gauge, about swapping between archdemon and demon mode a lot, and making sure you're keeping track of whichever mode you're currently in so you don't accidentally go into the wrong combo. Dual Blades definitely has animations that are going to hold you in place that you have to commit to, but it's less so than ever. Thanks to Blade Dance being cut into 3 parts, it's now longer than it used to be, but part 1 and 2, you don't have to continue into 3. Blade Dance 1 though, the first part, is one of the longest animations you have, so you can entirely ignore that by just going into a Demon Flurry from Archdemon mode and then transitioning to Blade Dance 2 and then 3, which are great DPS and come out really quickly and hold you in place less. So with the right gameplay, you can prevent yourself being animation locked quite a lot. Demon Flurry and the movement that provides allows you to move around the target in general, but also you can combo into it to break out longer animation locks too. These things require understanding of the weapon, so that's why I think it's a bit over SNS. You do have to manage the swapping between the modes and manage your stamina and all that. But there's no doubt that, perfect evading takes skill. That maintains your demon boost for increased damage and the incredible new mobility it has from those new demon boost dash attacks. But if you really want a perfect evade with ease, you can put in a bunch of evade window into your build, so it's not so bad. Really, as a dual blades player, you need to get used to the new systems, get comfortable swapping between the modes and what that does to your combo options. And once you're happy and comfortable with perfect evades, that's the hardest thing done. So still one of the easier weapons, but I would argue harder than it's been in the past. Just above that then, next we have Hammer, which obviously I talked with Cotton about, but I find that the toolkit is very simple, especially when we think back to Rise and especially Sunbreak with the scroll system where you've got 2 setups. I would find myself in maybe the wrong scroll and then end up doing a spinning bludgeon at the wrong time. These days, they've really overhauled the moveset, and so you can smoothly combo into a spinning bludgeon without accidentally doing it. It's very much a choice. And now that just doesn't happen anymore, that accidental spin. You've got new tools like the Mighty Charge, which is so strong and so easy to throw out. Even without a combo, you can just send it, and it allows you to move while you're doing it, which is really nice. Or say when you're doing the basic charging and moving, you've got that new grapple dodge to help you evade for free or reposition quickly. Really, as I talked with Cotton about this, the hardest part about this is managing the offset and actually getting good use out of it. Obviously, it's one of those ones that must be comboed into, but it does let you hold it, which is nice. But the downside of its offset is the fact that you don't get any sort of special movement or follow-up that helps you punish the offset properly like most other weapons do. Plus, you're not getting any of the awesome new benefits of how strong guarding is in Wilds. You don't have like a perfect evade, and you don't have any special hyper armor to bolt through attacks. So your attacks do need to be measured at least a little bit, which definitely makes it slightly harder than other weapons. And we also know it's one of the weapons that's going to be redesigned a little bit in Wilds, as one of the first to get that post-launch. Its upwards changes coming, so we expect rebalancing on some motion values. I can also see new mechanics or even new attacks being added, so we'll see what they do. Next after Hammer then, in a similar tier, we have Heavy Bowgun, which, just like Light Bowgun, allows you to play at range, and so there is some less forgiving aspects to that. But Heavy Bowgun compared to Light Bowgun, I just find a lot more complicated. You have an offset, which is crazy, but you don't just get to do it. You have to have ignition mode ready first, and then you have to get the weird offset timing of it, setting up this strange device and firing at the right moment. Thankfully, it's a very strong attack, so, there's that. And there's ups and downs in regards to the fact that you have an auto guard, which is really nice, meaning you don't really have to evade certain attacks, you can just auto block it. But this also gives you the perfect guard option, which, as we said, is a super impactful mechanic in Wilds and very forgiving against most attacks. You just pull out the guard at the last moment and ignore whatever's happening. With its ranged ability to, access easy punish windows and also keep fantastic uptime on the optimal hit zones, there absolutely is skill involved with this weapon. And getting the highest output possible takes some real understanding not only of the weapon, but of the monster to be able to use these longer animations that happen at times. So I would say it does creep towards, say, the middle of the difficulty of the weapons. But above that, we have gunlance, which is a lot more interesting in Wilds in my opinion. It has a lot of new combo options that are a bit more complicated. Obviously, the double worm state combo is super cool, Finding those windows for the big cannon blast and having 2 slots for that's really nice. I really appreciate the new shell movement to slightly reposition for a bit of your ammo as well. But it's yet another weapon that no matter what way you look at it, it has a big shield. And so whatever you're dealing with, you can guard on demand and obviously go for those perfect guards or guard points. And that leads into a lot of fast reload management. So it's actually quite easy for gunlance to reduce or avoid damage and yet maintain their DPS because of that shell management. There is complication to this, like you've got the different shell types and the playstyle and involvement with that. The interesting way that shells work with hit zones. It does have some longer combos though that require some prep and understanding, but every time I picked up gunlance, it's always gone pretty smoothly. Again, because I'm able to rely on that shield and then just go hard on those longer combos whenever they're given to me. And whether I'm going for pokes and then a pop of a shell, or just dumping all 5 out in a nice slam combo, it all feels very reliable, measured, and easy to fall back on those guards whenever I need to. So somewhere in the middle of the pack feels right to me. Just above that, kinda, we have bow, which I had a little bit higher, but when talking with Josh about bow, he feels the weapon is easier than ever it feels in Wilds right now. With how free the weapon is and having that perfect evade discerning dodge at that baseline. He describes it as playing dual blades with like a 5 evade window as a comparison. So that perfect evade is just very forgiving. And obviously it gives you a ton of stamina back so that you can just keep up the DPS. And a lot of the weapon revolves around doing a dash shot to give yourself some quick power up. Straight into the circle, circle, repeat combo. And for focus striking, even maximizing 1 wound at a time to interrupt and cancel monster attacks to give yourself bigger punish windows. And all of that's from range. So again, just like the bowguns, you're able to target the weak zones pretty well, even when other weapons, such as melee weapons, can't. Now, there have been some interesting changes from the base version of Wilds to Title Update 1, where some things have changed. Like we're starting to see speedrunners actually use that whole arc volley shot really good against, say, Shia. With the 1,000 dragons being buffed up as well, and popping those arc shots off the back of that is quite effective. And if you're able to use Tracer Arrow on a great hit zone, it is worth engaging with, of course. Positioning carefully to pierce through if you're going for the focus attack and then into the fast dragon piercer after that, even though that's nerfed slightly in this patch. Getting a big juicy pierce through quickly is still very valuable. But ultimately, Josh feels the kit revolves around a lot of just basic dashing, normal shot into circle, circle, managing your wounds effectively, and just repeating that, maintaining, your coats the whole time. I feel the optimal version of the weapon definitely makes more use out of its overall kit, but at the right time, in the right position, aim correctly, which definitely takes a bit of skill. Around this level 2, I also have longsword, which is another weapon that has one of the lower skill floors, but higher skill ceilings. The difference of picking up a longsword and just using it at a basic level, super straightforward and easy, not much of a thing to talk about. But the high skill ceiling is all about those perfect parries, a lot of special sheath parries in particular. Putting down a bomb and getting a level up against a monster that's not even attacking you, parrying all of the roars with the tighter windows of that special sheath parry. You can always do a foresight slash, but the special sheath is going to do more damage, but it's got a tighter window. And that's really a great representation of the 2 levels of longsword, taking the harder choice because it has more reward, but that backfires against less experienced longsword players. Anyway, longsword got a lot of changes in Wilds that have made it feel very smooth and has more options than ever, really. The fact that you can cancel a helm breaker when you're in the air is one obvious example. The hyper armor on the new full release, or say the thrust part as you start a helm breaker actually. If you're in red gauge, there's all these new options. Obviously, the Crimson combo is great, but the infinite awesome max DPS combo is so easy to do. There's not even any special timing to it. You just do Crimson 1 into Spirit Blade 1 and repeat. You also have a great lockdown on monsters with the Focus Strike. It holds them in place more than others because obviously you can get multiple level ups by doing that Focus Strike and the positioning of that aim. So I guess they want the monster to stay still for that to help you. You have new follow-ups in the red gauge with, say, the round slash into a big leaping attack, or the upgraded foresight slash with a whirl. Like I say, longsword, it has a lot of finesse and high skill ceiling, but in Wilds especially, a very welcoming skill floor. In about the same level, just above that, we have greatsword. And again, I talked with Josh about this. He agrees that it's a low skill floor, but another high skill ceiling weapon. You've got an extremely simple kit here. A massive amount of what you're doing is ultimately, quick draw attacking, getting through that second charge quickly, and then doing a full charge, true charge slash as many times as you can. And in wilds in particular, of course, we have focus mode, which has a big impact on all melee weapons, but greatsword is one of the best examples of that because it means aiming that big impact on the right hit zone is significantly easier than it's ever been, really. You're able to do a full 180, and if you time it wrong, aim it wrong initially, you're able to adjust accurately, easily to make sure you hit that hit zone or the head or whatever. So all the skill in the weapon really comes down to the timing, the aim, and that kind of thing. And you have, say, perfect guards now that are really reliable. Amazing with greatsword because it's got a great startup window for that. It's almost like being able to counter an attack. But then you have offsets, and arguably you have the best offset in the game because you can just send it immediately, but you can also hold it with a charge, which, you know, is a pretty helpful thing. And you've got shoulder bash as a fantastic tool if you timed your next attack wrong as a free reset and to kind of ignore the attacks for minimal damage. So there's a lot of forgiveness to the kit, like I said, low skill floor, but the high skill ceiling comes with optimizing that output and mitigating every damn attack of the monster to effectively punish it. And we're seeing some incredible things in the speedruns. Next up, just above that, we have Switch Axe, which I initially put higher in the list, but after talking with Cotton and Josh about it, and you know, my experience with this weapon, talking with them about it, I brought it back a bit. The weapon's obviously being memed on in Wilds as a one attack weapon, which is full release, right? It definitely simplifies the weapon a lot, but you can't deny that there are systems in play that you have to understand and manage. I still think that there's a higher skill floor to this weapon than other weapons in many cases. But because I'm very experienced with the weapon, this feels like a very easy version of it at this point. The two versions of the weapon are of course the axe and the sword, which have different movesets. With the axe, you're in the more mobile option. But you've also got that offset. It's one of the more awkward offsets though, because it has awkward wind-up frames, but if you combo into it, it can be a bit quicker. There's some skill there. You have a power system with power axe to manage, and then with the sword mode, you have the amp state to build up, different combos that work completely different. You have the sword counter, which don't forget, is a different button layout to offset, which when you're learning the weapon, definitely feels weird. But with the way they've changed the sword counter, it's very, very forgiving. Like even in Shia, when he's setting me on fire, I can counter that and just ignore most of the damage. There's a lot of hype around protection. Sure, you have to carefully position. Sure, you have to find the windows for the full release. But the weapon does come down to a lot of basic switch gauge management, reaching amp state as soon as possible, and then full releasing as much as you can, even sacrificing switch gauge management just to get off another one as quick as you can. And there's not a lot of, you know, difficulty in that concept. Setting that up and effectively doing it the right hit zone, positioning the attack, which by the way, the hitbox of the full release comes out to your slight right. You know, you need to position that. Focus mode aiming helps. There definitely is skill here, but it's kind of in a silly state right now. Definitely easier than it has been in the past, in my opinion. Next up then we have Insect Glaive as we get into the harder weapons, and I had to learn the weapon for the arena challenge against Deshagama because none of the weapons offered in that hunt were weapons that I properly main. So I took on a lot at once and it was quite an enjoyable, interesting experience, a challenge I had to overcome to get that A rank. I was surprised by the length of certain combos like that charge attack that kind of get you stuck in animations. You need to make sure you're using that vault to reposition and evade attacks effectively, worrying about keeping your uptime going the whole way. Because you want to use that charge attack though, this means you need to get red essence and maintain that. But you can't just stand there holding circle, you need to be attacking at the same time, which results in a bit of an awkward claw grip that takes a bit of time to get used to, raising the skill floor in my opinion. The essence management system has always been a bit clunky. Now you can aim and fire your Kinsect, or you can charge it for a penetrating shot to double up and gather multiple, but you can also aim with focus mode and do basic attacks, and have your attacks work in unison with the Kinsect, which is a really cool concept, but requires you to position yourself at different hit zones, maybe not the optimal hit zones, to get the essence. I will say that there's a lot of help for the essence management when you start to use focus strikes and that refills all of them, but you kind of have to reach this perfect point where you're opening wounds effectively to keep that up. The new essential super attack that spends all your essence to go up into the air is awesome, but requires you to do it the right place on the monster at the right time with a longer animation. You can be knocked out of it. Then there's some skill in recovering the essence you've just dumped, like where did you actually land the hits to get what essence back, and while you're in the air, maybe do do a focus strike mid-flight to hit a wound that's normally out of reach. You can also do the new charge attack while you're in the air to send yourself flying down and do a long combo as you land, but these animations, as effective as they are, do lock you in them, and they're easy to be interrupted. So I think this new playstyle in Wilds is really cool, but takes some getting used to. Therefore, I think the skill floor of this weapon is a bit higher than quite a lot of the other weapons of the game. And maximizing it is really being able to maximize those longer animations and have great essence management at the same time. Getting close to the end here, we now have Charge Blade, which I consider one of the hardest weapons of the game still, but actually noticeably more forgiving and easier than it has been in the past. The reason for that is that this has been one of the most, if not the most complicated weapon for a long time. But now there's new ways to do the various things you want to. Let's say you want to charge your shield. A classic thing would be to go into an AED, so while you're in sword mode or comboing into that from sword and shield, you would cancel that and then that would charge your shield, which isn't that hard to do, to be honest, but when you're explaining that to someone or learning it for the first time, it feels weird. Now you can just charge the vials and then hold one button, which is circle on a PlayStation controller, and get a guard point which also charges the shield. A very easy way to get that concept in your head. Let's say you want to get the power axe going. Well, how are you going to do that? Is it some sort of complicated combo? You just land a perfect guard, which is obviously super good in Wilds. Or you focus strike, or you finish a mount, or you combo into it off of, say, a clash. There's like 4 ways to do one thing now. That's what I mean when I say that this weapon is a lot more approachable than it has been in the past. Now, like a bunch of weapons, if you have a guard, you can rely on that. How complicated is it to use the power axe? The 4-part massive combo with a new follow-up at the end? You just press circle 4 times and hold it for the chainsaw to get the ticks. So even though it feels like there's more options and the skill floor is a bit lower, which is nice, it is still one of the more complicated weapons. Like you have a vial system, which has this new overcharged concept. You have the shield powering up, you have the axe powering up, you have the sword powering up. If you want to go into super amped element discharge, you first have to charge the shield, and then now in Wilds, you need to combo into it. That can be off a basic guard, which is definitely easy, but it has to be after an AED into an SAD in a lot of cases. So it's obviously still one of the more complicated weapons, but is it the hardest weapon in Wilds? Probably not, because Hunting Horn exists. This is interesting because you have multiple hunting horns that you're going to use for all the different melodies that they have, which is ultimately a complicated system to manage and understand. The melody systems vary per weapon, so you're running 2 hunting horns for that reason. You're going to buff up with the first one, swap to the other that you actually fight with, but buff up with that, and try to manage that too. So it's a weapon that has more setup than other weapons before the hunt, but also during it. When you're doing the fast melody setups during a focus strike or echo bubbles, there's a lot of management there. How you prep the fight with the echo bubbles. There's a speedrunner that got a fantastic time in the Deshagama Arena Hunt where basically the entire fight took place inside of the 3 echo bubbles they put on top of each other. But it goes beyond that. More complicated details that Cotton was explaining to me. Like every attack has a variant based on, your left stick input at the same time, which has different motion values and animation times. So that's really awkward and something that makes the skill floor a lot higher. The attacks that you're doing can't just be used randomly. They're going to play the notes that you need to trigger the melodies you want. So you need to be doing the right combo to get the right melody for the max DPS, while also making sure you use the left stick correctly in coordination with that for the higher motion value combos and attacks that are available. There's also subtle extra mechanics with, say, Performance B, where you press R2 at the right time between each song that you play, and that essentially enhances the effect of it. Kind of like Perfect Rush with Sword and Shield, but even less visual and less obvious, to harder to grasp at a base level. And while the weapon can offset, not every hunting horn has the offset melody, which, might catch you out. And all of that complications rewarded with some of the lowest output out of all the weapons in the game right now, based on the speedruns for the entire length of Wild so far. So to play Hunting Horn at a base level, the skill floor is a lot higher. To maximize the weapon, the skill ceiling is super high. And to have great output, it just takes a lot of effort. So for the moment, we think Hunting Horn is the hardest weapon in Wilds. But there you have it. That's my overview of all 14 weapons and the difficulty of them. I've tried to be as measured and reasonable about all of this as I can, but what do you guys think? Are any of the weapons placed a bit too high or a bit too low? Let us know. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.